Transfer portal players must be impact players.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day, whether you're watching the show on YouTube or wherever you want to download your podcast. Never forget, this show is free, and always remember how much I appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you're going to get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. If Lincoln Riley wants to rely on his high school recruits, and he's made that, well known that he prefers being able to build his roster through recruiting high school players. Everybody wants to do it that way. Well, if that's the case, then his transfer portal selections, they cannot miss like they did in 2023. Look, there's going to be a hit and miss ratio that happens with recruiting. It happens with the transfer portal. For example, for every Zachariah branch, there are going to be 10 highly rated recruits that are going to take a little bit longer to cook, before they're done, kind of ready to be served up on the national stage. They'll contribute, but they don't make that instant impact like a Zachariah branch. So if roster spots are going to be offered to transfers, those transfers must be impact players, not a role player, and definitely not, you can't be dead weight. In Coach Riley's first season, he had to hit the transfer portal hard. I mean, the previously recruited players that were already at USC, look, they were processed. USC needed to elevate the roster. Lincoln Riley was very outspoken about that. So, for example, Jackson Dart, out. He wasn't really processed, but when Caleb Williams was coming in, you're not going to be the starter. Miller Moss recognized that. Mario Williams, he made an impact when he arrived, wide receiver, but I think everyone's going to remember him for his Cotton Bowl gaffe more than anything. Fair or not, it is what it is. So what about Shane Lee, Austin Jones, Jacoby Covington, Jordan Addison, Latrell McCutcheon, Romello Height, Brendan Rice, Earl Barquette, Carson Tabaracci, Bryson Shaw, Terrell Bynum, Tyrone Taleni, Travis Dye, Bobby Haskins, Solomon Byrd, Mekhi Blackman, Eric Gentry, and Sinjin Astani. Out of those 20 who came over through the transfer portal with Lincoln Riley in 2022, his first season with USC, besides Caleb chipping in with that Heisman Trophy, what was the hit to miss ratio? I'm going to go through the list. Shane Lee, hit or miss. I think his contributions are probably more noticeable with adding to the culture and how hard the work needs to be if you want to win at a high level. Remember, he came from Alabama. On the field, he was injured, and I think some of his weaknesses were exposed, at least in Alex Grinch's scheme. Austin Jones, I'm going to say the same, but he was solid on the field as well, so he made an impact. Jacoby Covington, stay healthy, stay on the field, he'll make an impact. Jordan Addison, obvious, yes. Latrell McCutcheon, no, not so much. Romello Height, he's back in the transfer portal. Brendan Rice, definitely impact. Earl Barquette, you're saying who? Yeah. Defensive lineman from TCU, no impact. Carson Tabaracci, to be determined. He's still got a few years left. He came over, was hurt. Now he switched over to the tight end spot, I believe. So we'll see what happens. Bryson Shaw, very inconsistent in Coach Grinch's scheme. But if you ever heard that shot by Seabank, One More Shot, an 80s song, go look it up. Bryson, he's got this spring coming up, and we'll see if he's going to be around in the fall. I hope so. I like his intensity. Stand-up guy. You need him in the locker room. What about Terrell Bynum, wide receiver from Washington? I think the best way to put it, USC's wide receiver room was loaded, and he struggled for reps, so did not have an impact. Tyrone Taleni, defensive lineman. He was good in year one. injured much of last year, so he gets a check mark for yes. Could have been more, yes. Travis Dye, enough said. He should have been a Trojan for an entire year. Remember, he got hurt towards the end of the season. Bobby Haskins, yeah, I think so. He played through injuries, tough as nails. He and Cortland Ford were battling for that left tackle spot throughout the time. No one could stay healthy. Solomon Byrd, yes, absolutely. And he really shined last year, this past season. I think it earned him an NFL Combine invite, right? Which, by the way, he's one of 8 Trojans who was invited to the NFL Combine. Mekhi Blackman, Eric Gentry, Sinjin Astani. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I've heard that song before, too. So if we were to look at the numbers, if I was to calculate it out, I would say 13 and a half out of the 20 transfers were a hit, made an impact. That's 67.5%. That's not bad. That's a good number. Now let's compare it to 2023. Anthony Lucas, Bear Alexander, Marshawn Lloyd, Traquan Fagans, Michael Tarquin, Christian Roland Wallace, Jamil Muhammad, Dorian Singer, Mason Cobb, Jack Sullivan, Eddie Traplisky, Jarrett Kingston, Emmanuel Prion, Keon Bars. That's 14 guys that were brought in to help finish what 2022 started. Anthony Lucas, no help last year. This year he gets Coach Henney, Coach Henderson, Coach Nua. It's got to be this year. Bear Alexander. Oh my. I mean, all I can say is I'm thinking about his development this year with Coach Henderson and Coach Nua. That has me hyped because Bear Alexander was doing a lot last year and he didn't have a lot of help inside. Marshawn Lloyd. Yes, but I think he was also underused. Could have given more. Traquan Fagans, he saw playing time late in the season, and especially he got a lot of playing time in the bowl game. He looked good, so I'm going to put him in the to be determined. Michael Tarquin, well, guess what? He's transferred to Oklahoma. He came to USC. He started at the end of the year. He was a backup. Same thing happened to him when he was at Florida. Christian Roland Wallace, definitely impact. He stepped right into those shoes that Mekhi Blackman left behind. Jamil Muhammad, absolutely. Really good last year. I think he was underrated, maybe underappreciated. I'm looking forward to see what he does in his second year in the system. Well, not in last year's system, second year at USC. Dorian Singer. He went from all conference at Arizona to role player at USC. Back to the transfer portal, and he landed in Utah. So that would be a no. Mason Cobb. Right now, I think his impact is more along the lines of Shane Lee, that type of impact. But he's got this year, as well as Coach Matt Entz to kind of tighten things up for him a little bit. Jack Sullivan, he had a depth, but nothing like his Purdue numbers. So no, not an impact. Eddie Traplisky, the punter, sure. I mean, he hasn't hurt the team, and that's always a plus when you're a specialist. You know, if you don't hear their name, that's a good thing. What about Jarrett Kingston, offensive lineman, transfer from Washington State? He was out of position for much of the year, so not his fault, but not what was anticipated. So, I don't know, partial credit, but I have to go with no as far as making the impact that was needed. Keon Bars, unfortunately, it never happened at USC. So, I'm going to be a little gratuitous, and I'm going to say 8 out of the 14 were or will have an impact. So, that's 57%. That's not good. For a program that specifically, wants to target veterans in the transfer portal, USC has to have a better hit rate than they did in 2023. They just have to. Otherwise, you're carrying dead weight. So far, Coach Riley has 11 guys transferring in 2024. So far. He can't miss like he did in 2023, especially with those defensive guys coming in, like Isaiah Rakes and the Arnold brothers from Oregon State. 67.5% is going to be better than 57% anytime, any day of the week. Coach Riley needs to bounce back with the transfer portal in 2024. What I will say is 67.5% is good when you're completing passes. In fact, that's great. We're going to talk about that next. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets. They've got live same-game parlays you can jump on. They've got exclusive prop bets and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. I've got a question. Now you know what we're talking about today. So yeah, I had to pull that up. I apologize not having that up earlier. Anyways, I had mentioned that 67.5% completion rate is really good. Well, what if USC doesn't have enough wide receivers this spring camp? Are there enough? Zachariah Branch is going to be running track this spring, and Duce Robinson is planning to play baseball with USC's team. They're going to be on the road all season. If you're not aware, Dado Field is out of commission this year while the new football facilities are under construction. So already down two really, really, really good wide receivers this spring. And Mario Williams, Michael Jackson III, Dorian Singer, and running back Rayleigh Brown, who plays wide receiver, they've hit the transfer portal. And that means they're joining Taj Washington. Well, they're not joining, but Taj Washington and Brendan Rice, they're waiting to hear their names called when the NFL draft gets here this spring. The wide receiver room has some space to kind of stretch out right now. So while Miller Moss can make any wide receiver look good, he's going into spring camp kind of handicapped by the numbers right now, if you think about it. Miller Moss, Jake Jensen, and Jaden Mayava, those are your three scholarship quarterbacks. They're going to take turns throwing passes too. Here's who's going to be available this spring: Kyron Hudson, Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, a handful of walk-ons, and then you got two new arrivals, true freshman Xavier Jordan, and the D3 All-American from Tufts University, Jaden Richardson. The tight ends, no Lake McCree, he's still rehabbing, and the running backs, I think, are going to get involved in the passing game a lot this spring based on those numbers. Not a lot of guys to throw the ball to at the wide receiver position. I fully anticipate at least another one, possibly two wide receivers when the transfer portal window opens in the spring, end of April. The question is, what kind of wide receiver should Lincoln Riley be looking for, though? You know, you look at what USC has right now, and granted, they're going to get Zachariah back, and they're going to get Duce back, so things will get better during the PRPs, the player run practices during summer and fall camp. But still, you want to keep that chemistry growing, and you're going to lose what you had going in the late in the season and in the bowl game, taking that break. And if they're not going to be around in the spring, you'd kind of like to have them around. So I don't know. USC right now has kind of a bigger wide receiver look to them. And I know Jacoby Lane isn't thick, but he is tall. So I think Lincoln Riley probably wants maybe another slot type of wide receiver. But again, we have to see who's available, right? I said the running backs could be involved. At least they should be involved. Last year, check this out: Austin Jones and Marshawn Lloyd. They combined for 26 catches. USC has a transfer coming in at running back, Joquavius Marks, Woody, Mississippi State. Came through the Mike Leach system. We know Lincoln Riley is a big protege out of the Mike Leach coaching tree. But did you know this about Woody Marks from Mississippi State? Running back. He played in 45 career games. He started 32 of them. And this is crazy at running back. He's had at least one reception in every single game of his collegiate career. That's crazy. Woody also owns the program record for career receptions, 214. Most receiving yards by a running back, 1,225. Both of those numbers, most in program history. He concluded his Mississippi State career with the fourth longest active streak nationally, which is second longest in the SEC. In 2021, he had 83 receptions. That's the third most in program history and most by a running back. Again, he's a running back and he had 83 receptions in one season. He finished his Bulldog career with 1,883 yards rushing, 22 rushing touchdowns. He also added 214 receptions, 1,225 yards, and 5 touchdowns through the air. Check out this stat. This is really cool. He became just the third running back since 2020, the last 5 years, to have at least 1,000 career rushing yards and 1,000 career receiving yards. Who are the other two? Duce Vaughn at Kansas State, Jahmyr Gibbs, Georgia Tech, Alabama. Jahmyr Gibbs has become a really good player in the NFL. I don't follow the NFL that much, so I'm sure Duce Vaughn is having a good season as well. Good career. I just know, based on the playoffs that I watched, Jahmyr Gibbs, good. What about, so the question, does USC need another wide receiver? Of course they do. It's possible that one of the walk-ons, Josiah Zamora, Ty Shamblin, Corey Niehaus, maybe one of those guys pop during the spring and like, okay, maybe Lincoln Riley doesn't have to think as hard about the transfer portal. We'll see what happens. But right now, when you look at the numbers, if I'm Miller Moss, I'm thinking, all right, well, I know who's coming. I know who's going to be there in the spring. I know who should be available in the fall. Let's see what Woody Marks can do. Let's see what the freshman running backs can do, because they're going to need to spread the ball around. Again, I don't know. How much will the tight ends get involved? Right now, for spring camp, they're short on numbers at the wide receiver position. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from the seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time literally will take all the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time has easy to find and buy tickets because the app shows you views from all the seats in the venue with the lowest price guarantee, and they even have event cancellation protection. And that takes the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, Game Time users can use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I might not always be right, but I'm never wrong. End quote. When I bring up an unpopular opinion regarding strength of schedule, I get some pushback. Again, when I bring up an unpopular opinion regarding strength of schedule, some people like to push back. They don't give a reason why, they just like to push back. Right. As you know, I do a weekly show over on wearesc.com called Inside the Trojan Huddle. It's a panel show. A few weeks ago, I've talked about this before. Bring it up again for a reason, because it's topical right now. Like I said, a few weeks ago, my esteemed colleague and we were debating over the merits of a 10-2 USC versus a 10-2 Alabama team. I'm not talking about USC and Alabama playing each other with 10-2 records. I'm talking head to head for the last open spot in the playoffs. Remember, we're moving to a 12-team playoff system. I'm a huge proponent of keeping both of the Bay Area schools on USC's non-conference schedule in some way, shape, or form. If it were up to me, Notre Dame, Cal, Stanford are USC's permanent out-of-conference opponents. Rivalries are kept alive, travels saved, win-win all around. It's just good for the tradition of college football. USC's conference schedule is going to be 9 games. That's been the norm for USC in the Pac-10, Pac-12 forever. The SEC plays 8 conference games. That's been their norm forever. It's because they like to pad their records with 4 home games against non-conference, out-of-conference schedule games. 3, or if they don't get the 4 home games, it's 3 home games with 1 tough out-of-conference game on the road, and a lot of times that's on a neutral site. And I'm okay with the 3-1. I'm fine with that. What I'm not okay with is the pastry factory that shows up in November, and it's usually right before a rivalry game. It's a way that the SEC is like, let's rest our good players and get the backups some playing time. It's a good strategy, good tactic. I just don't like it. Kind of gaming the system. And Alabama was notorious for doing this. So assuming Alabama has 2 losses and USC has 2 losses, okay? Both schools are 10-2. Every single one of USC's games are going up against an FBS school. And I don't care how down Stanford or Cal is. Now they play in the ACC. So a little bit more of a credibility bump. Not much, but a little bit of a bump. Losing to them is still losing to a power conference team. Period. End of story. The same way that Alabama kind of gets to flaunt wins over Vanderbilt or a down Arkansas team or a down South Carolina or Kentucky team, they don't get dinged when they lose to those teams. Not nearly as much as USC gets dinged when they lose to a Pac-10 or Pac-12 team. So why is a 10-2 Alabama with a 20 to 30 point win over Louisiana Monroe or the Citadel, why is that better than a 10-2 USC that includes a loss to Stanford and a Big Ten opponent? That's the question. So do me a favor. Don't respond with some trivial BS unless you can support your opinion. And here's why. Guess who's going to a 9-game conference schedule? Yep, that's right, the SEC. Glad you stuck around. Now you understand where I was going with that a few weeks ago and why I was still right then and why I'm still right now. Quote, we have 8 games scheduled right now, Texas Athletic Director Chris Del Conte said. We're working on going to a 9-game schedule, but we have a ways to go with that. I would say this year we have an 8-game schedule. The following year we have an 8-game schedule. Then we'll look at going into a 9-game conference schedule. It's done. They're doing it. Adding Oklahoma and Texas are adding more losses to the conference. They're just going to get spread out. Strength of schedule is going to be a factor in the 12-team playoff system. It just is. 10 wins and 2 losses and who they're against matters. This is why, again, this is where I'm more right than I'm wrong. not 100% right. There are going to be more 10-2 and 9-3 teams than there are going to be 11-1 and 12-0 teams. There just are. You have to accept that. And that means your schedule, the entirety, totality of it, better be worthy. You can't slip in Austin P or University of Massachusetts. Those welfare checks that the SEC has been writing to those types of schools on an annual basis, those days are over. Look, I've said this multiple times. Eventually, there will be a 64-team league. I don't know what they're going to call it. And out of those 64 teams, and I'm talking about the FBS teams, that's what the schedules are going to be made out of. The Super Conference NFL style, that's coming to college. We're halfway there. We're kind of already taken it there and put it on steroids when we're talking about NIL and the transfer portal. So this is me with my I told you so face. Again, if I'm wrong, explain it to me. Why am I wrong? Why is 10-2 Alabama, with one of their wins against UMass or the Citadel or Austin P, why does that 10th win better than USC's 10 wins that came against every single opponent from an FBS conference? That's the argument. All right. I'll be back with another episode of Locked On USC tomorrow, because that's what we do around here 5 times a week. And I think I might have a special guest. So you'll need to tune in to find out who it's going to be. So until then, everyone, you know what to do.